Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Team Tuesday. This week we have with us Milica Lubinic. Hey Milica, welcome back.
Hello Vasco, thank you.
So first of all, let me say that I really appreciate when somebody who doesn't speak my native language is able to pronounce my name like you just did. I
have the same gratitude towards you.
It is quite rare these days because the Portuguese pronunciation is quite different from most languages. But I do recognize that if you have a Slavic language background, there are certain things that are much easier to pronounce in Portuguese, and Vasco is one of those. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Now, we're here to talk about teams, of course, and we'll talk about teams in a second. But we also want to know about books so that we may learn from those and explore new ideas. So Milica, share with us, what was the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
I think one of the books that had the biggest impact was The Power of Vulnerability, Brené Brown. I think it helped me understand or kind of put words and meaning to the things that I was not able to understand and kind of separate before. So kind of trying to understand and live through the difference between fitting in and belonging. And I think once I was able to kind of nurture belonging with myself, I was able to also transfer that example or lead by example with the teams and team members I was working with. So for me, understanding how vulnerability works, how it works with shame, and how you can actually dive into getting into that belonging space. I would call it space, rather than being in this fitting in kind of one is what helped me the most.
So I hear your words, and I am at least somewhat familiar with the idea of vulnerability. But you expressed and communicated this difference between fitting in and belonging that I had not heard before. So I'm curious about what that means. Like, how would you distinguish between the fitting in type of behavior versus the belonging type of behavior?
So belonging is pretty much coming as you are, being able to bring whatever you have in your little bucket wherever you are, and risking or having the courage to be to go through certain pain because of that. So that's pretty much courage / that's vulnerability. Fitting in is more about trying to be what is needed so that you are accepted in a certain environment. So I'm usually, when I'm trying to explain this to the teams I'm working with, I'm usually using this high school example. So, when you're in a primary school or in high school, what you're doing when you're trying to fit in, or what kids usually do, is like, you would go into, Gothic style or whatever, just because, you would like to fit into that group and you feel like that might be something that would, work for you. Belonging would be, I'm coming as I am for whatever that is. I have very bad taste in, wardrobe and hairstyle or whatever, but I am who I am. I'm coming as I am, and I'm risking for whatever is there to risk because of that. But I'm true to myself. And then the connections that I will make will be with my true self, and the people who are able to recognize that, acknowledge that, and connect on that on a more deeper level.
Well, you made me curious about that book. So thank you for the recommendation and the description. I'm definitely going to read that book next. So, Milica, of course, we're also here to talk about teams, talking about fitting in and belonging. And we want to hear about how sometimes, these teams create their own problems. And we want to hear about one of those cases and how it developed, right? Because sometimes it starts with very small things, comments, attitudes within two or between two team members in a meeting, whatever that might be. But even though they start small, these dynamics tend to grow and become problematic for the team. So tell us one of those stories, Milica.
I think for me, when I look into those patterns and when I look into those kind of challenges that teams are going through, mostly they're connected with the lack of the ability to sustain a certain change. So when you get into the phase where you feel a pain for a certain thing that is not working well, let's say, I don't know, just as a stupid example, we're not good in, I don't know, doing refinements. And this is a pain. It's a painful meeting. We end up sitting there for hours. We have no outcomes. It's super exhausting. We end up with 2 or 3 people talking out of 6 or 7. And so when people feel the pain, they're very eager to make a change. And that's the easy part, right? You help them figure out what would that change look like, how would that be, and they are very eager to make it to make it work. But what I see as a very often as an issue is the ability to sustain that change. And one of the things that very often happens, and one of the things that I actually saw a couple of times in my career, is that you figure out what are the improvement areas. People kind of have some action items. They start picking up on those. And then you have a team lead that jumps into this role of team reminder. He or she, they start imposing reminders towards certain action items, kind of like, hey, have you seen this? This is still an action item. We should be, taking care of this and that. And what that creates, even though it's a very it's best intention, it has best intention in the background. And I know that a lot of very often team leads or managers or whoever are very eager to help the team, make that transition and make things better. It becomes, as you said, it starts with this small thing, and then it ends up with complete lack of ownership and taking responsibility. Because as long as there is someone else reminding me of something that I need to do, it's their responsibility. It's not mine. I don't have to think about it because I have someone who will do it for me, right? It's as if when you have to take a medicine, and for a while you just have an alarm to remind you. You don't ever have to think about it ever again, right? Because there is an alarm. It will set at certain point. So I think one thing that I'm working with teams in these kinds of situations is just helping them understand that it's okay to fail throughout the process. It's okay to forget. It's okay, because habit takes time to be created. You very often you need, I don't know, around 40 repetitions. I think that's one of the things that research shows to actually take on a certain new habit. And if there is someone else taking responsibility for the things I need to do, then it's their habit. It's not mine. So how do we get there with failing and learning from that failure? So we forgot about it once or twice, about a certain action item or certain thing that we agreed on. Okay, we forgot about it. So what do we do now? What is the thing? So let's be honest. Let's reflect on that, and let's say, hey, we failed. Beautiful. Okay, so what's next? How do we make sure that we don't fail again? So what is the thing that is going to be working for you? And sometimes it's a very stupid thing. Like maybe you will have a reminder. Sometimes teams are creating to-do lists. I don't know. It can be very, it can sound or look very banal, but it's in the end a very useful tactic to actually create that habit. And sometimes we need additional tools to help.
It's an interesting aspect that you brought, the idea of sustaining improvements and change by taking the perspective of creating a habit, right? Because very often and this is actually, in my mind, quite a critical aspect to change. We'll talk more about change tomorrow, of course, but very often we look at change as a project, right? Like something we need to start and finish, right? It's just a bunch of things and we just need to go through it. And if I understood you correctly, what you're introducing is that change is a habit. It's about understanding that, there will always be small things that we need to change, and we need to create the habit, the muscle memory, if you will, of picking up that and delivering on it. And the interesting thing for me in what you describe is not just that it is a habit, that's interesting in itself, but even more interesting is this aspect of the ownership that comes from the reminder. Right. And I've seen this happening. I mean, I was a project manager. I'm guilty of doing that, right? Like following up and checking that stuff is done, which is what what companies hire project managers for. But inadvertently, what they're doing is taking the ownership away from the people that need to do the work. And I think you described it beautifully. So I was wondering, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Because these are very important aspects, I feel, at least, right? Like this idea of ownership plus the habit. And we talk about continuous improvement here a lot. And I think that those two aspects are really critical in that cycle, that dynamic.
I think for me, it's different in each of the teams. But one thing that was standing out is that once you have a continuous conversation about ownership in the team, and you have a lot of things happening, but no one is really picking up on things, you start having a conversation with the team, or at least for me, I started thinking about what is the actual problem with this? Why are these people not taking responsibility? They are super passionate about the project. They're motivated, they're young, the team energy is fine. There is psychological safety within the team, which is one of the things that I would look into first. But then in the end, it just doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen because it's the reality of how our brain works and how we are getting used to certain things. And so that's the first thing. So how do you create a habit? And then who has the responsibility of creating that habit? Because if it's someone else, then it's still not mine. And it's kind of making that distinction between these two things.
I really liked it. So I'm definitely going to start referring to that, because I think it's these two aspects, the habit creation and then the responsibility maintaining, right? Maintaining the responsibility, because it usually starts well. If we help the team figure out what they want to improve, it usually starts well. So I think those two are really critical. I'll definitely refer to this. Thank you for sharing that, Milica.
Thank you.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, but tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.